Hey guys, welcome back to Arry The Stag. TR Tony here, sat in the driveway anticipating Christmas. No, it won't be sat here for 2 weeks, wait until it arrives. But anyway, welcome back, nice to see you. This week we've had lots of emails in and photographs in and so on, so thank you for that. Please keep them coming, don't feel shy. Please feel free to join us on the Facebook group if you like, Arry The Stag, look it up, and we can join in the fun. This week we've had a few photographs over from a guy called Rob over in the United States, and so I just thought I'd put them all together and show you his stag that he's got over there and what he's done to it. There are some differences between the US and the UK kind of specifications, so it's interesting to see that, and let's just share his story. Okay, so meet Rob. He grew up in Prestatyn, actually, in North Wales, and learned all about stags from his dad while growing up in the 70s and 80s. The family had at least 2 stags over the years, and he got to drive the last one to Rhyl and back as a special treat for passing his driving test in 1989, which was really something. Rob's now an expat in USA. He's living just north of Cincinnati in Ohio, and so he's used his stag knowledge to take a risk on buying one himself. And here it is. He's got the late Mark I 1972 Federal, that's USA-spec automatic Triumph Stag. It's got a Borg Warner 35 gearbox automatic in it, with 23,255 miles, purchased from the first owner's family in July 2019. Now, originally the car came from Cincinnati and was purchased in 1972 by a prominent local family, and very well looked after indeed, and kept in very good original rust-free condition by the family mechanic ever since. It was resprayed at some point from damson to carmine red to match the owner's Spitfire, and the owner's son inherited the car and registered it in 2002 with the same 22,561 miles on the clock. So no MO2 records in the USA, as you probably know. However, there are some limited service records which you can see here. Now, it appears the original owner, then in his late 60s, hardly ever used the car after 1985. The story goes that the father hardly used it, and really since 2002 the son only ran it a few times a year until it warmed up and then put it back into storage again. The fact that the engine bay is all original, and the original Michelin tyre was still on the spare, the toolkit is all intact, and the original sticker still on the air intake, which has now fallen off during the fight with replacing the radiator, which we'll talk about later on. The hood sticker is still on the windscreen, and the original radio is still installed and works. These are all great signs that the mileage is probably genuine. So the purchase itself, taking a risk on buying a Stag which was running hot. When Rob went to look at the car, it was at a local mechanic shop being made ready for sale. It happened to be up on the lift at the time, so he could check out the underneath, and all appeared to be rust free. The mechanic told him that it was running a little hot, like all Stags do, he said, and of course Rob's alarm bells began to go off. He couldn't see any signs of head gasket leak, so he put a deposit on it, and contingent on a successful drive in 2 weeks when the car was ready. And indeed, when he went back for the test drive and hopefully to drive it home, the mechanic had his head under the bonnet again. "She's still running a bit hot," he said. The owner was there, and so Rob was quite proactive and asked all the usual questions. Had the car ever overheated to the red? Ever boiled over? Had it ever had a head gasket blow? Ever had any problems with the water pump? All of which the owner answered no to, except that the mechanic recalled that they had changed the water pump several years ago, but they couldn't remember when. So Rob went for a test drive, and sure enough, the original gauge sat halfway between the middle and the red, and didn't budge. Being 90 degrees Fahrenheit ambient outside, by the way, the old girl is doing pretty well, he says. So when he gets back to the garage and the mechanic pulls out his infrared temperature meter and shows Rob the temperatures in the top, bottom and back hoses, all hoses are between 170 and 210 degrees Fahrenheit, and in the USA, as we all know, they use Fahrenheit, not centigrade. So in brief, the car is not overheating too badly, but it is hot. So Rob takes a risk and he buys it, and notices that it gets hotter on the 1 hour stop start drive home in the 90-degree heat, but never actually reaches the red. Staggy, as he now called her, arrives safely at her new home, running very hot indeed, but not bothered. And the next morning the expansion bottle was empty in the original position with no modifications, so he topped her up halfway and checked that the radiator level, which actually was full, and the cooling system worked as designed and he believes properly maintained, and hopefully always will. So Rob replaced the original 47-year-old radiator with an aluminium one, and in the USA, you probably know they say aluminum, from Wizard Cooling. He reverse flushed the coolant system and replaced the top hoses and bottom hoses and the metal pipe that went with it, and indeed the thermostat. He kept the original radiator cowl, however, but the new aluminium one, if I could only say it, it doesn't appear to need it, so that's good. The temperature gauge still runs a little hot, so he replaced it and the voltage stabilizer on the back of the speedo, and that actually, hey presto, made it run right in the middle of the gauge and in 90 degrees heat, just a touch past center, which is a pretty outstanding achievement. Close enough for Rob, as he says, and he bought himself an infrared temperature gauge and tested everything and was all good, running at 195 degrees Fahrenheit, sat idling for 30 minutes. Safety first, so he replaced the seat belts. They were a Rimmer Brothers purchase and fitted three-way shoulder straps in the back. He even wired up the seat belt alarm system himself, so he was very proud of that achievement, and put new brake shoes on it, a set of 185/80/14 Vredestein Sprint Classic tyres, and he had also to fit tubes and rim strips because of the original wire wheels, and had the leaking rear brake cylinders changed and a steering rack bush replaced. He had the traditional belt screech on startup, as some of us occasionally have, and the alternator light would come on at idle. So after the first replacement belt self-destructed, he had the local European auto specialist change the alternator and the belt. They also changed out the struts, the shocks and springs, again from Rimmer Brothers in the UK, on the front and the rear. And the coolant system was also pressure tested to confirm no head gasket problems were lurking. And so, as you can see here, the car came with a hard top on, so his wife and himself managed to get it off and was dreading to see what shape the soft top might be in. But as you can see from the photos, it looks like the hood had never actually been used, pretty much brand new in fact, as is the frame within it, which is absolutely fantastic. Inevitably, there are some key differences in the Federal U.S.A. Stags. Firstly, there's not a lot of room under the bonnet, or the hood as they call them, for anything really. You'll have seen the seat belt warning on both front seats, and that's something Rob's very proud of. There's a driver's side adjustable mirror, both internally and externally, so that's really good. On the left front, you can see an old heavy York compressor for the air conditioning, and it still works apparently, although somewhat noisily. On the left and right of the engine bay, you can see two evaporator canisters, and back in the early 70s, the USA had strict emission regulations, not anymore in Ohio at least, he says, so all Federal Stags had to have emission controls, which was very forward for their time, if you think about it. Now, those charcoal canisters catch fumes from the fuel tank, and then the carbs suck those fumes back into the engine, so it's a really good way of recycling. In front of the radiator, you can see a second radiator for the air conditioning system, with the two fans sitting in front of that to help cool the refrigerant, and all electrics and fans work perfectly. There's a thermostatic valve sticking out of the radiator that connects vacuum pipes to the carbs, and when the car is in park and idling, the valve detects the coolant temp, and if it rises, the vacuum pipes will activate. We do know how, and perhaps I can do a separate video on that at some point, and the carbs will raise the idle speed, so hopefully to speed up the fan and cool down the coolant. The key thing to watch out for, little details, are that the Stag logo on the back panels, I think, is pretty much specific to the USA as different to the UK, with cruise lights on there as well. And indeed, the US cars never had the stripe down the side, the dual stripe that we're all used to in the UK, yet all had the side sill covers, the chrome silver covers over the top. And of course, he says finally, the steering wheel is on the wrong side. Okay, so that's Rob's Stag. Thanks from all of us, Rob, to you over in the US for sharing with us your wonderful Stag. You will, of course, now qualify for a very honorary Arry The Stag bobble hat, a very small but perfectly formed fan club of those that have shown us their stags worldwide. So thank you very much. That'll be whistling its way onto him very shortly. And I guess that just remains for me to say thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you online on Arry the Stag very soon. Cheers for now. Bye. And incidentally, if you'd like one of our window stickers, it's double-sided, Arry the Stag badges, you are more than welcome. All you've got to do is just let us know via personal mail, PM, on the channel, and we will happily send you one, or even two, free of charge.